What's up, everybody? So stoked that you're joining me here tonight on YouTube live. I guess it's not that late yet. It's only 4:05 tonight somewhere. But anyway, yeah, I'm excited to jump into this and really in real time be able to show the effects and impacts of what long-term care does. What really motivated jumping in and doing this was there are so many people that when we're in an appointment with them and we start to run the numbers and they see what those effects are, they're sort of jaw dropped a lot of times, and they can't believe that that's the impact that it has, and that's like the wild truth of the expenses of long-term care. Before we dive into all of that, I just want to make sure to give those of you who don't know who I am some context. So I'm Matt Franchina. I'm the co-founder of Policy Engineer. So if you're not following us and you just stumbled across this, do click that follow button, check out some of the other videos that we've built there, and subscribe and get notifications. And we're on basically every social media platform, so go ahead and follow us if you want more great information about all things financial services and insurance. My brother Chris and I, we started the firm back in 2020, but we have a combined total of like 25 years experience in financial services. It was 2009, I got invited to learn more about what it might be like to work in this industry, and interviewed and decided I'd get my insurance license and spent a few years doing that. And I cut my teeth on insurance working with seniors. The company I worked for at the time, that was their specialty, was just working with people who were aging into Medicare and Social Security and that time of their life. The reason I'm sharing that with you is because I started that way and I've spent the majority of my career that way. So I've had firsthand experience working with folks who are right at the transition period going into retirement, and then I've watched them go through the phases of retirement, of being excited and having a whole checklist of things they want to do, all the way to the point where I have people who now to this day are dealing with long-term care, are making claims on the insurance policies that we've set up for them, and some of them don't even remember who I am. And it's a sad truth, but what is beautiful is that at least many of the people we've had the chance to work with, they were able to plan, set themselves up to avoid some of the massive pitfalls that you run into if you take on these expenses unknowingly. And so I want to throw this out there first. I might be the first financial advisor to tell you that you don't have to have insurance, but I would say it is so crucial that you have a plan. And that's what this is really about, is exposing how these expenses can impact somebody. So we're going to make up a fake scenario today. I'm going to screen share and show you a program that I work with all the time called Money Guide, but it's also a program that you have access to. I believe the link in the description will give you directions on how to go and set up your own account. It is completely free, and it's a service that we provide to our clients. And you, whether you're a client of ours or not watching this video, have access to going in there and setting up your own account and using these same tools that you're going to see me using. You get access to the light version, which will let you do a lot of planning and get a lot of these numbers customized to you. So anyway, finishing that story, 15 years I've been in this business working with folks like this. Most of it has been focused on people in that point in their life where they're transitioning, going from work going from earned income to passive income. And that is kind of your I don't want to say your last shot, but it is really the time where if you're going to make a decision on how you're going to plan for these care expenses, that's the time to do it. Because anything beyond that time, it becomes super challenging to insure if you're unable to insure yourself. So before I dive into the software, let me just give you some basic stats or overview, like why would we even spend the time to talk about this? So Medicare, which is the health system that you're on if you're in this country when you hit 65, if you've lived here for at least 5 years, permanent resident, You paid in the system, you have access to that. And Medicare doesn't cover it. And Medicaid or Medi-Cal can cover caregiving, but it's going to cover it on their terms. And there are very few people that I've met with who the terms that they're going to do it on, or the terms they'll do it on, match the terms that they want. You're going to be giving up control and likely access to the type of care that you want. So Medicare says that the average length of time that somebody needs care in their life is just a hair under 3 years. And the average cost of care will vary across the country. On average, though, in California, where I'm from, you're looking at like $35 an hour or more for in-home care, and $7,000, $8,000, $9,000, $10,000 a month if you're in a facility with private space. But they say that 7 out of 10 people are going to end up experiencing a care situation before they pass. So you add that up, 7 out of 10 people, that's 70%, are going to need caregiving. The average length of stay is basically 3 years, and that's comprised of some people who might need a short window of time, like 6 months, 9 months, and others who need it for extreme lengths, and that might be 6, 7, 8, 9 years. You know, there are a lot of people out there who haven't experienced what caregiving's like. I can tell you firsthand, my uncle was diagnosed with Parkinson's at a very young age. He was like Michael J. Fox kind of era, like that age when he got diagnosed. And so that was well before I was in this industry. And so he was already uninsurable, and from a financial standpoint was not well equipped to take it on. So he fought that battle with Parkinson's for a decade and a half, and we watched the deterioration of his ability to take care of himself and him to go from partial care to full care to immobility before he passed away. And I'll tell you, proper planning will give the ability to put in place care that maintains significant levels of dignity, the options that you're going to want. So again, I'm not saying if you're watching this you have to have insurance, but what I am saying is you should know what it would look like if you don't have it, and then make a determination on whether you do or don't want it, or how you're going to set yourself up to make it through there. So let's dive right in. I am going to go ahead and switch my screen. I'll be sharing with you here. I know I can't see you, but I'd love to see in the chat if you are seeing my screen here. You should see a white screen, and it says your personal information, and this is the beginning page of building out a client inside of our planning tool. So feel free to use the chat. You know, go ahead and drop in there if there are any details that you have questions on, you want me to pause or elaborate on things. I'm not on a strict timeline, so let's spend the time making sure that you're getting the most out of this. All right, so let's see. What should we name our pretend client here? Let's just say this is Bob Example. Mr. Bob Example. Let's just say he just had a birthday. So he is born June 1st, 1964. So I'm going to make up and say he's 60. He's got roughly 7 years to standard retirement age. And let's also say that he is married. All right. Now, let's say this is Betty Example. And let's just say Betty is the same age as him. Maybe she's born 1 month before, so we'll say she's born May 1st, 1964. And this wonderful couple, we'll keep their email address out right now, and some of these other items don't matter here. But you can obviously flip-flop in here ages and set this up for yourself. But I'm giving you this example of a 60-year-old because I want to show you what it looks like for somebody who is at the time of their life when most people start to see the signs or the writing on the wall that this might be something worth planning for. And why is it that they're seeing the writing on the wall? Well, one is at 60 years old, if you have previous injuries, aches, pains, bruises, you know, that stuff starts to show its signs. You begin to slow down a little bit. Odds are you know someone, maybe your parents, maybe your aunt, uncle, cousin, or a good friend who's going through it. You've seen it firsthand probably by that point in your life, and you're saying, gosh, it's probably a good idea to figure out how might all of this work. So let's go in here and begin to build. I'm going to use you might have seen my selection there. There's a lot of options. I'm going to use a kind of medium depth, but I want you to know as I'm going through this program, if you were to ever work directly with myself or one of the other advisors on our team, we've got the ability to go extremely deep in the planning. This program gets really robust, but for example purposes today, let's keep out of the weeds too far. But again, drop it in the chat if it's something that you want to see. So I'm going to say that they are both employed, all right? Now, incomes can obviously be whatever, but I'm just going to use simple numbers. So let's just say that Bob's making $100,000 a year, and Betty is working part-time and also hanging out with the grandkids and doing stuff, and she's making $50,000 a year. Now, I'm going to assume no other income. This category would be like if they have rental properties, or maybe they're already pulling in a pension, or if there's a settlement, or there's a bunch of things, but we'll just assume they're working and that's the only income that they're earning. They are married. They live in California because that's where I'm at. And let's keep plugging along here. Okay, so when are they going to retire? Now, you could open a whole can of worms here, but I'm going to say that they're going to retire at 67. And I'll tell you why. Because the full retirement age for Social Security is 67 for anyone who's born in 1960 or beyond. If you draw, or if you retire earlier than that, and you collect Social Security, then your Social Security is going to have an early draw reduction. It's 6% for every year that you draw early. So I'm not going to impose that against them and them have to draw against the portfolio earlier. We're just going to say that they're going to get their, they're going to retire at the same time they can collect Social Security without having any of those early reductions. Now, the system is going to default that a male is going to live to be 92 years old and a female is going to be 94. We'll just leave it there. Now, this stuff here, are they willing to retire earlier? I mean, later, somewhat willing. You'll see later on in the program why that can matter. But here's what's important. 28 years. They're going to need to have their money last for 28 years. So, let's see, allow me to just pause for a second. Let that soak in. 28 years. 28 years. There we go, like that. Does that make a difference? Got some wild hair over here. We got our camera crew in here, gonna help us out. Is this what you meant? Oh, I see. Okay.
Just trying to phrase it.
Yeah, there we go. That's helpful. Thank you. So, why does 28 years matter? 28 years is a long time. What's going to happen during that 28 years? You might have seen some YouTube content that we put out recently about inflation, but inflation is going to happen. Things are going to become more expensive. So one thing that the software is doing is it's taking into consideration over the course of this 28 years how things are going to go up in price. And different items go up differently in price. But it's important that you think about it. When you're setting a target, how much money am I going to need to be able to retire? That you're also paying attention to the fact that the amount you draw off of it is likely to only go up. Maybe stay sideways. Not that likely to go down unless you have a major expense that's going to get paid off. So let's dive right back into this. So moving right along, let's assume they're not going to move to another state for retirement. They'll be living here in California. And then now we've got to come up with some goals. One of the goals is going to be their basic living expenses. Now, in Money Guide, if you should set up an account for yourself and start to go through here and start to play around, you're going to have the opportunity to get as detailed as you want, put as many goals in here as you want to. And you'll see here we have needs, there are wants, and there are wishes. So your needs are not going to be compromised. They've got to be met. Your wants, well, they'll be taken out of the plan if they have to be, but they're going to hold pretty strong. And then your wishes, those are the first to sort of not be accounted for in the plan if we're not able to get a high probability of success. So let's jump in here. Now, you might have some opinions of what retirement income is going to look like. I'll tell you a little bit about what the system is going to tell us if you use the defaults. So the default setting for total living expenses is going to give us a general rule of thumb, and it's an easy way to get a quick estimate. But when we're working on an individual plan for a family, we're typically going to go beyond this, and we won't use total, we'll use basic. You'll see basic living expenses are going to be the absolute bare minimums, like your utility bills, your health insurance, all your basic stuff, cost of food and gas and that type of stuff. For this example, I'm going to say total living expenses defaulted. So it's making an assumption here that in retirement, I'm going to hide some of this just to make it easier. When both people are retired, they need just a hair under $100,000. So how's it coming up with that? Well, it's assuming a few things. One, it's assuming that it knows your tax rate, which it does, all that's logged in here. So it's deducting all the taxes that need to come off of your checks. Then it's assuming that you're saving some money, that 11% of your money is being saved. And then we'll get an option to go in here and start getting more granular and adding things. But somebody making $150,000 a year is estimated to need about $100,000 of actual money to be able to maintain their style of living. Now, I'm not going to change a lot of these default things in here, but we could put expenses that would go away later in retirement, like you have a mortgage or something that's going to get paid off, or if you're going to change states during retirement, how you're taxed would change. Then importance level, this will give you an idea. If you label something as a need, it's an 8, 9, or 10. A want is 4, 5, 6, or 7, and a wish is a 1, 2, or 3. And inflation, it's using the assumption of the last 20 years, which is just a tick over that now because we've seen inflation a little higher in the last few years. But I'm going to leave the default settings, even though we can change it to whatever you want. Okay, so we've got default living expenses. Now again, for example purposes in here, not to bore you with all this stuff, I'm not going to go through and pick apart and add anything. But if anybody in the chat wants to go in and make a recommendation, you let me know, and I'll let you know how it affects the plan. But I'm going to keep it real simple. Let's just say this couple's going into retirement. They need that $100,000, and that's going to cover them. So let's keep plugging along. All right, now we're getting into Social Security. Now, I just want to pause for a second. Why the heck does all of this stuff matter? Right? Why are we taking all of this time? Why aren't I just getting to the point? This is how much long-term care costs, right? And just telling you what it costs and what it looks like. Because all these details contribute towards what you're going to have available to you. And it's important that if you haven't done something like this, that you do it, especially if you're like 60, 62, and within a couple of years, you're in what we call the red zone. The red zone is when you're roughly 5 years from the time that you're going to go from earned income to drawing off of your assets. And it's important because during that red zone, you've got decisions to make. You run a high risk that if something comes in and messes with your situation, like a stock market collapse, an economic turn, interest rates shift hard, these are all things that can draw down the assets you have available. So I'm going through here so we can give you a very accurate example of what the heck is going on here. Okay, so is it hot where you guys are at? It's warm here today. All right, eligible to receive benefits. It's talking about Social Security. So no would mean no, you're never going to be eligible for Social Security. That's when we would answer no, which would mean somebody who's going to hit full retirement age that doesn't have at least 40 quarters that they have paid into the system. So most of you are going to answer yes. unless you are maybe a school teacher paying into the state retirement system and you don't pay into Social Security, then you're not going to get Social Security. That might be another reason that you would check that. But we're going to assume that Bob and Betty example here, both of them are eligible for Social Security. And you'll see here it's defaulting that they take Social Security at 67 because that's when we said that they would retire. So the system's pretty good at estimating. It's estimating that it'll be $39,000 for Bob and $25,000 for Betty. It's assuming that because it knows how much you pay into Social Security each year. Based on their income, it's making an assumption that if it were to reverse engineer the average increases of wages over time, that this is what they've paid in. Now, we've got the option to go to an advanced, but I'm not going to do that right now because it gets so granular that we can put in year by year since like 1960 what they've made. Now, one thing I would recommend that you do is I recommend that you go to Social Security's website and you create a profile, right? All you've got to do is go to ssa.gov, create a profile, log in. You can click and find out exactly what your Social Security income is estimated to be. And now you can download something called your earnings report. That earnings report is what we use to plug in the exact details in here. But in that earnings report, you can find mistakes, and then you can hold them accountable. Those mistakes would be if for some reason when manual information or information is being input manually into the system, if someone entered your income that you earned incorrectly in a tax return or how much you had paid, a lot of this information was just manually typed in years ago. And if you're 60 years old, then you were working before the days of computer systems, algorithms, and all these programs that just fed data everywhere. So someone had to keep transferring the info. And we know how the telephone game goes. So you should look in there and see if there's not a year that you really made 111,000 and for some reason it says you made 11,000. Those would be things that you can find that they don't happen often, but I have seen them in my years of doing this, so I recommend you just go in there, take a look, set up your Social Security account. Just by doing that, you're gonna be a little bit more apt to pay attention to how you start preparing for the future, because you're gonna have an idea of how not much money Social Security gives compared to what you're gonna need. But anyway, let's keep plugging along. This is looking at a lifetime benefit of $1,762,812 for this couple if they live to the ages that we input into the system. Now, there are ways to maximize that, right? Social Security has something called deferral credits. Earlier, I talked about if you draw it down early, that you get a reduction. But there's also an option to get credits. So every year that you wait to take Social Security beyond that age of 67, you get a credit of 8%. And that's limited to age 70. So you've got 3 extra years if your full retirement is 67 that you can add this 8%. It's 24% you can increase Social Security. Now, a lot of people might be like, Matt, I don't want to wait an extra 3 years to retire. That's not necessarily how you do it. You may be able to, you build a bridge, right? And you build that bridge through financial planning strategies and different financial products that you can use to help you bridge that gap. But anyways, just know that you've got some options to work around, and that's why our system here allows us to do that. But let's get back into the weeds. All right. So now this is other retirement income. If somebody out there has a pension and you're like, man, I'm part of a union or I have a pension, I want to see what that would look like, you can drop it in the chat, let me know, and we'll show a couple of options. But right now, I'll assume there's not a pension because most people these days do not have a pension. Now, we could also put things in here like rental income, but all of this is income that's coming passively. So if there was alimony, if there was a settlement, a pension, an annuity that you own that's set up for a lifetime income, stuff like that. We'll assume they haven't done anything like that. Okay, investment assets. Why does this matter? This is essentially the fuel you've got that's going to cover all of the expenses that are above Social Security. And in the event you needed caregiving one day, you're going to use that money too, unless you decide to place an insurance policy. So just want you to know on this page, we can get very granular where you go all the way down to every single investment, ticker symbol, allocation, and we can build the exact replication of what you're invested in. And you can do that too if you build the tool for yourself. If you're just joining us now and you weren't watching at the beginning, in the description there's a link to this same program I'm using. It looks a little bit different for you, but you can set up a free Money Guide account and begin to use this to do your own planning. So for today though, I'm going to do the simplest version possible, and it's going to be giving one total and letting the system make some assumptions. So for this couple, let's just say they're worth close to $1 million, right? They're going to get to $1 million probably by the time they hit retirement, assuming the market stays moving in the right direction and they keep making their contributions. But let's say they have $950,000 saved. And let's also say that when it comes to their retirement accounts, I find these days most people are retirement account heavy. Pros and cons to that. But let's just say 75% of their assets are found in their 401k. So why do I say there's pros and cons to that? Well, I find that a lot of people get unintentionally forced into equal and sometimes even greater tax brackets than they were in while they were working. Using tax qualified accounts like IRAs and 401ks to get a tax write-off today by design works well if when you're in retirement, you're drawing the money out and you're in a lower tax bracket than you were when you earned it. When you're looking at tax strategies, your goal is to end up paying the least amount of taxes that you can, right, on that money, legally and justifiably. But so if I put money into a 401k and then later in life I pull it out and it gets taxed at a higher rate than when I earned it, I might as well have paid the taxes on it then and then invested it, because those investments would have been taxed lower than income. So that's the con, is that you can build a big bubble, and at 73 years old, the IRS will require you to start to extract money out of there and pay taxes on it. And if those accounts get large enough, like this couple, maybe they've got multiple millions by then. It can cause a burden. Now, the advantage of it is you get a write-off. So if you're trying to find a way to reduce your taxable liability right now, then you can put money into a retirement account and you'll get that write-off. But moving along, we're going to assume 75%. I'm also going to make an assumption here that they're adding $18,000 a year. So let me tell you how I came up with that. 6% is the most common company match that we find happening out there. And that landscape changed a lot when like 2008 happened. A lot of them took away the matches. When COVID market drop took place, stuff rearranged. But 6% match is a pretty common match that we find. And many people are motivated to put at least as much to get the free money their company's putting on the table. Well, in this case, 6% of their annual income of $150,000 is $18,000 a year. And I'm going to give them just a basic 60-40 stock bond split. So we'll say that they have 60% of this money in equities, and then the rest is going to go into bonds. All right, so we've got their total assets. You can see here, it broke the account up. This account up here at the top, Joint Survivor, that's going to be their money that's not pre-tax. There's $237,500 in there. And then we've got their retirement account, $712,500, $18,000 a year contributions. Now, we can get in there and get very detailed, but for tonight, I'm going to leave it just like that. All right, moving along. Okay, so this is where we're going to put other assets. Let's make an assumption that they're a homeowner. So I'm going to go in here, I'm going to add their home. Any recommendations in the chat? How much should we say their home is worth? We'll say this is their joint home, survivorship, And yes, this is their primary residence. I'm not able to give out any participation points in the chat right now, so I'm going to go ahead and just say that their house is worth, let's up it. Let's say their house is worth 900 grand. You know, depending on where you're worth, this is going to be more or less relevant to you. In Southern California, in Orange County, where I'm at, that's a very relevant number, maybe even on the low end of things. In California being one of the most expensive real estate places in the country, you can probably resonate with this. But let's just say the expected growth rate is about 4.5%. And here's the big important thing. Do you intend to sell this home to fund all your goals? So I'm going to say no, that they don't intend to, because they intend on living in their house all of their days. This is their forever home. This is where they raise the kids. This is where they're going to die. That is what we hear all the time. So let's make that assumption. But if I did say yes, it dramatically impacts the sustainability of all their money and the ability to handle big changes in expenses, because the program will end up showing that you sell the house and then you end up using that to fund goals, which obviously means a lifestyle change. Okay, so we've got that asset in there, and let's keep moving forward. Okay, so risk. Let's just talk about risk for a second. Why is risk such an important thing to touch on? Well, you're going to see as I move this little bar across here that risk is something that will impact volatility. Volatility is the ability for something to move in one direction or the other. And the higher the volatility, the increased the chances are that it could swing. It could swing in a good direction, up, can also swing in a bad direction. And so it's important that you have an understanding of the type of risk you have an appetite for. The reason it's so important is because people make bad decisions when they feel like they're in situations of distress. When you're freaking out because you got 3 years left before retirement and your portfolio's down 39% because you don't check it that often, then you heard somebody at work talking about how they're freaking out a little bit, and you go pull your 401k statement and you go, oh my gosh, I have practically half of what I had last year. How am I going to retire? Is it going to make it back? And maybe you sell. And you sell all the stocks, and then you end up moving to cash. And now you put yourself in a position that you're probably not going to make that money back because you're being a lot more conservative than what got you there. So it's going to move slower on the way out. And I'll take this opportunity to let you know, nothing I'm talking about today is financial advice to you, because I'm not meeting with you one-on-one. I don't know your situation. I can't give advice individually. So please don't take anything I'm talking about as advice or go make moves without first talking to a licensed professional who can help you, whether that be myself or somebody from our firm or another firm that you trust. But understanding how much risk you can take will prevent you from being in a position where you make bad decisions because you're thinking out of character. So let's say for Bob and Betty example here, their risk score, let's see, what does it look like if they're a 50 out of 100? Now, I want you to know, this is not like a GPA system. It's not a grade point average type of thing. This is saying 1, ultra low risk, 100, you're pedal to the metal, right? Well, a 50 means that during the Great Recession, 2007 to 2009, you would have been down 21%, or in their portfolio of 950,000, they would have been down $198,212. So what happens if we go a little more risk, move them to 60? They'd be down 26%. Now, obviously, it's everyone's prerogative. They can choose to have whatever risk they want, and this is an individual situation. But for today's example, let's say that they're on the moderately conservative or moderate side, right? They're just a little bit above the 50 mark. And I think for the most part, when I meet with people and they're at that age, that is usually where they land. Now, this is saying that to have that type of risk, you should allocate your funds in a total return fund. Again, this is not investment advice. I'm just showing you what the system tells us. And it's saying that you have about 60% in stocks, and your average rate of return is about 5.5%. Now, in this day and age, that return's probably a little higher because rates are high and those bonds are going to be performing at a different rate than what they have in the past. This system is going to use averages, okay? But we're going to assume the risk is at 60. Oh, I left you guys in the dark there, sorry. So let me go back really quick. This is what I was showing here. So here's the risk score of 60. Score of 60, 26%. They used the Great Recession because that was the second largest decline we had seen since 1929. I don't know if it's going to happen again. I know it could happen again, but it's important to use that as a reference point because, I mean, gosh, if you are at least 30, 35, you probably remember that time. Some of you look at that time and think, man, I remember mom or dad or grandma or grandpa freaking out. And some of you remember it yourself, what you were going through. But so this is what I was clicking on here. Thanks for the warning, Richard. I wasn't showing you guys that. Okay, here is probably one of the most important pieces of this whole software. We're going to talk about your probability of success. So what this thing is right here, this is going to run something called a Monte Carlo analysis. If you've never seen one, it's basically running 1,000 trials of what could happen with your money. So let me run this 1,000. All right. So we're in the green zone. 848 successes out of 1,000 trials. So basically, in other words, this means that if they live to the age we said they're going to live to, if they spend at the rate we said they're going to spend at, if they invest their money with the risk tolerances that we said they're going to do that at, and inflation happens at the rate that it has happened at the last 20 years, then they have only 16% of the time where they would outlive their money. Now, ideally, we'd get somebody into the blue. The point of today isn't to show you how to take it from green to blue or purple to green or how to move that. That'd be for another night where we go and talk about what are the different things you can play with. Now, if you do register for Money Guide and you get in there and you build this out yourself, I would recommend when you get to the spot that talks about probability of success, you spend some time in the play zone. The play zone, I'll click through and show it to you, but we're not going to take a ton of time in there right now. But again, 848 successes out of 1,000 trials. If we have time tonight, I'll show you a little bit more of what that might end up looking like and the different tranches you might land in. But you'll see here, these reds, those would obviously be the things that we would want to avoid. Now, how does having a financial professional help change this? Well, this is assuming that you just held exactly what we set up and just rode your way through all of those different situations. The goal behind working with a professional is that that person can see the writing on the wall and start to make some adjustments. Nobody's got a crystal ball, but there are signs that if you do this as often as we do this and you're studying it, you can potentially see a little bit earlier. A lot of these softwares work in our favor as well. Okay, so the play zone is a spot where now you can click around and say, well, what if we retired earlier? What would it look like? Or later, right? So we could say, Bob, get your booty to work for 3 more years, defer that Social Security, and boom, there you go. 3 years, goes to 94. So this is the type of thing where it works really well for people to get an idea of like, I could put in another 6 months. It's going to make that big of a difference? Yeah, it's going to make a big difference. It can. Or what happens if we spent a little less? Well, then boom, there you go. So, whoops, you use this to figure out how you're going to live. But let me get this back to our original setting. Okay, so again, I'm not going to spend a ton of time in the play zone. I'm going to move on. I'm going to go past the summary of changes because I'm not making any changes right now. The system is starting to make some recommendations and something in here called Super Solve. If you want to see what that says, I guess we have time to click on that, right? Let's see. What does it say? Super Solve. So this is going to make recommendations. Now, again, we got to get in here and tweak it, but it's telling us to increase living expenses, and yeah, we got to go and fiddle around with it. This is where you got to go with the play zone first. So let's cancel that out. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time tonight in the allocation comparison, but this would be where in the tool you could look at, hey, how am I currently allocated? You remember I took the really simple option, and then this is how it's telling you, hey, you may want to consider that. This is not investment advice. I got to tell you that again, okay? And I'm just repeating that because, hey, we live in a world where we got to make sure. But now we're getting to the real meat of what this was all about, which is, what is the ugly truth about long-term care and those expenses? So I told you some of the basic numbers earlier, right? Long-term care expenses in Southern California, if you need home care and you're going to do it with a agency who's all legally registered, has all the insurances to protect you, removes all the liability off of you, you're going to be looking at around $35 a month. If there's anyone on here right now and you've ever needed care or you've known anyone, you've been through the situation, I'd urge you to share your experiences. Like, what did you pay? Or what did your family member or someone pay? Like, what did that look like? Just so that if there's anyone else on here who hasn't lived through it, they can see through your lens. But we're going to see in here, how do these different things impact? And so this is a really powerful tool. So I'll click on all of these and I'll show you a few different things. But first, let's just isolate the care. So this person's going into retirement. They're feeling pretty confident. Hey, 88% of the time, our money takes us all the way out until we're in our mid-90s, and it handles inflation and our spending habits, and we live great. So we go in and we talk about a healthcare situation. Let's just say that Bob needs care at age 80. Some people need care earlier, some need later. Give me some suggestions if you'd like. But let's say he needs it for that average of 3 years. And let's just say that he needs it. This is using today's dollars. The system will apply inflation automatically. But let's say it's going to cost him $72,000 a year. It takes the probability of success down into the purple zone. Would we drop 15% probability there? And so let's say that Betty needed care, but later. So she's 84. And maybe she only needed care for 2 years. And her care, it was in a private nursing home, and it cost $87,000 a year. It dropped us down to 61%. Now, let's say that scenario happened, and we had inflation runs a little wild on us. You know, inflation is something, we should do a whole nother session on that, but we've been doing these videos lately, and we did a game called Friendly Feud, and I went out with some buzzers in Newport Beach and started asking people questions about how prices have changed. And a lot of people got answers wrong. They're funny videos. Check them out, and we're going to put out some more. But we didn't ask people how much has caregiving expenses gone up from 1984 until now. But had we done that, it actually might have been one of the largest expenses that have risen. Caregiving expenses, on average, at least here in California, they have increased at a rate of more than double what standard inflation has. You know, insurance companies are required, if they offer inflation protection, meaning the insurance will keep going up every single year to match the rising costs, they're required to offer 5% annual increases. You got to choose if you're going to buy it, but they have to put it on there, because for For the last 20 years, inflation has risen around 2.5%, and caregiving expenses have almost doubled that. So what if inflation, instead of being 2.5% on average, increased to 3.5% over that period of time? And then they end up needing care. We're in the 30s. Oh, man. See, we got used to this. Good thing we got a pit crew here. So you can see what changes I made there. It took them to 34%. We had a situation where two people need care, one for a little longer than the other, and we have inflation. I'm going to fiddle around with this for a little bit because I think it's interesting to see some different scenarios. Wow, we got a comment here. Let's see. Richard said, I've worked in assisted living long-term care in the past in Orange County, California. Average cost of care, give or take $5,000 to $6,000 a month. Thanks for sharing the experience. So let's go back into the care situation. I'll unlock this one, and we'll say that Betty didn't need care. She didn't deserve to need care anyway. Maybe that sounded bad. I meant she didn't deserve to be put in a position where she needed care. She lived long and healthy and one day moved on to glory. That's what I meant. Okay, so she didn't do anything to deserve to get put in that position. How can I write that wrong? You can't really, huh? It just came out bad. There's no way to fix that. It came out bad. I didn't mean it, Betty. Okay, so let's just say he needed care. He still needed that standard average, but that inflation came out and it was 1% more. How does that work? It's still 50-50 shot. Okay, I don't know about you, but I don't want to go into my retired years with the flip of a coin being the odds that I make it to the end and not have to rely on others. And that's what this is saying. So again, am I saying you have to go out and buy an insurance policy? No, not necessarily. But you do need to be prepared to know you have a plan. I would say you should look into insurance policies. You should see how much they're going to cost. They're going to range based on your health, based on the age when you get involved, and based on the style of insurance that you want to end up covering it. But there's other scenarios that could cause this. You know, maybe inflation runs exactly normal, but you experience 1% lower average returns than what you expected. We're back down into the 50s. Or what if both of them don't live long? What if there was a passing away? So we go back in here. Men tend to pass away before women. So let's just say she needed caregiving, and we put her at that $72,000 a year. But Bob wasn't around to be able to offer that. Bob passed away abruptly at 75. That causes a problem. Why? Because Bob's Social Security became her Social Security, and her Social Security evaporated. So her income dropped by that much, which meant she needed to strain on her investments that much more. So there's a lot of different ways you can fix this. There's not just one single cookie cutter option. Maybe you invest the money different and grow the net worth. Maybe you restructure how you spend. Maybe you place insurance. Maybe you put a combination of all of them. But the point I want to get across is that it's important to have a plan. So let's just keep clicking through here. In here, what we get is the ability to create a report. Now, what you're seeing here is the report I can give you. Your report's going to look a little bit different. So what we would do here is we'd export a PDF, be able to shoot it over to you, but we would only be able to do that if we had a one-on-one meeting where we had the opportunity to fill this out to completion with you and get to know your situation best, make some recommendations in here, and then we'd send you off with a copy of this is your current scenario, and this is what it would look like if you followed our guidance. And then it's your prerogative to choose how exactly you're going to move forward on that. But I want to tell you that we're here to help. We'll charge nothing for a consultation, but most importantly, you got to take the time to go through this information. So any questions in the chat? Anything somebody wants me to go in here and adjust or play around with? Let's see, blurry. Well, first make sure your glasses are clean. Just kidding, miss. Well, it's been a pleasure going through this. I guess last thing I would say is we'll be doing more of these. We're putting out a lot of rich content around how you can personally benefit from planning, how you can look out for pitfalls, how you can read your statements better, all kinds of stuff. So make sure to subscribe to the channel, follow us on Instagram. I am at The People's Advisor if you want to follow me a little bit more closely in some of the things that I'm getting into. But it has been an awesome evening, and I appreciate all your guys' time. Hopefully that was helpful, revealed some stuff to you. And don't forget, go to the link in the description, create your profile, and get to work in your money guide program and see what your probability of success is.